So it'll play in a lot of ways. I'm just making the association between Pluto and the moon. Now this moon can be in any one of the, Pluto's there, but your moon can be in any one of the 12 signs. So there's 12 different attitudes to the moon. And it can be in any one of the 12 houses, so 144 different circuits. When you put these together, there's 144 different types. And then there can be planets lining up with an aspect of adding more factors to this. So this builds up to vast information. Astrology does this. But if you have these pieces in place, you can navigate into the kingdom of aspects, into the vastness of correspondences and associations, and start to see the layers of information. And instead of it being an overwhelming thing, you can specifically go in and get the definite layers of meaning related to that planet and to that sign and to that house and to that and the aspects made to it. So it just keeps going around us. We're looking at the planets and signs. You can know these signs without, you don't have to know someone's time of birth to know this, except when it's right on the edge. But usually you know the planets and the signs. But the difference is you don't have to know the time of day. It's pretty well there that day or that month or whatever. The houses become factors based on knowing the time you're born at. So, okay, when Pluto goes over to Leo, it goes from home security to my kids, my performance, my play, my romance. Wasn't I wonderful for you? Wasn't I the best guy you ever met? No, what do you mean no? I have to be. You're my wife, you have to be. It puts a control over what my kids have to do, what education I'm getting. There's a need to have to perform no matter what. You know, so like if we were up against a bully at school when we were kids, nobody came in and helped you. Your parents would never go and say, this bully's picking on my kids. They say, here, take a swat, hit him, fight him. If you get hurt, okay, but fight it out anyways. You get some respect out of it. That was the attitude of the Pluto and Leo generation, just coming out of the war, military attitudes for everybody. And there was, face your fears yourself. Be proud of it. That's the sun. Your confidence would be affected by fears you haven't faced, and would tell you what fears you have to face and how to overcome it, whether it's fears about education, about your own confidence, about playing, about performing, about your kids, about having kids, about not having kids. There's many, many specifics that's going to happen, but you can see that sort of hidden fear or confrontation and need for what's true and harshness going in to affect the sun, and your sun is having to fight for confidence. It has to fight against things that aren't true. It has to fight the fear to try and make it truthful. And if the sun is being truthful, and you're being truthful in your confidence, then whatever battles come down, you have to play it out according to your confidence. So I hope I'm making sense. I'm just trying to explain what I'm doing, how I'm thinking, in weaving the textures. And as I'm making these associations, I'm making 2 or 3 associations of Pluto to the sun in Leo. But you're going to have the attitude of Pluto and Leo. It's going to affect your basic confidence. And then your sun's going to be one of the signs, one of the 12 signs, and it's going to try and express it. But this fear will still be there and be playing out and affect it. So we all have Pluto somewhere, and it's all affecting our confidence. It's affecting one of our planets. It may not be our confidence, but it's going to, when we look at Pluto and where our sun is, when we look at Pluto, so you can look at any of the planets, but usually when you're looking at Pluto, the same science, in the most direct planet it's going to affect is the one that rules it. That's where you're going to have a chance to see that. Now that harshness can be, like Pluto in Virgo or in Gemini, Pluto to Mercury is really intelligent, partly paranoid, harshly truthful, but somewhat sarcastic, but very frighteningly perceptive. This is true, that's not true. Like, it's not compassionate, it's power in ideas and fear of ideas and fighting for what one knows and how one expresses, or fighting against other people who don't think the way you do. So the Pluto to the Mercury creates fear in the mind, and the fear in the mind can force you to get the truth, to get to the knowledge and the truth behind that fear. That can be brilliant. It's really good for astrology, the Pluto affecting Mercury, because it's non-enchanted, sharp, true thinking. But that sharp, true thinking, what happens if you're in a school and teachers aren't fair? You're going to be fighting your teachers. Or at work, or you're fighting someone you work with, or you're fighting how something should be done. Your ideas, your mental frame of work is on confrontation mode, or paranoid mode, or having to prove oneself mode. It's not going to be frivolous. And if you're frivolous, there'll be immediately someone confronting you, or you might have no tolerance for what someone else would say. You might have to control the conversation. That's the Pluto affecting the Virgo. But you can see powerful writing, powerful ideas, but you can also see confrontational ideas. I wish I had Trump's chart handy, but he has a whole pile of planets in Gemini, and he just uses ideas, but it's not, Pluto's not affecting it now. But his fixity of ideas is extreme enough, but if you add Pluto to that, it'd be even more extreme. And perhaps, like, there's a messianic side to fanaticism to Neptune, but there's a power struggle fanaticism to Pluto. There's an anxiety, a fear, and of having to face fears and having things, I can't do this, I have to do this. Someone's telling me I have to think this way, I have to think myself. There's going to be battles over the way you think, and therefore battles with teachers, people trying to tell you how to think. Could be gangs in the hood, for that matter. But Pluto will be in those signs affecting, if it's in that sign, it's going to affect that rulership. When you put Pluto into Venus, you're going to see the texture of each of these is changing as it changes the planetary ruler. So Pluto goes into Taurus and Libra. Venus, how I'm getting things, what I choose, what I like, the vanity principle, the love and beauty principle, love and hate principle. Pluto goes in there and it's I absolutely love this or absolutely hate this. Pluto makes Venus harsh. It takes away the enchantment. It makes it, I got to have the money, I got to have the cushion, I got to look good, or I'll get an operation to fix it. I mean, you could say the Pluto and Libra generation, which is about marriage, could also be the facelift generation too. Went out of their way to have to fix anything to make themselves look better. So the fear of not being rich, fear of not being beautiful, the fear of love, the fear of hate. I'm saying fear because the fear brings the confrontation around the truth. It's fear, it's confrontations over who's my lover, who's not, who's sharing with me, who's not, am I appreciated, am I not? What's fair if I'm not? Who do I have to marry or don't I? Pluto makes the choices harsh. And that how you make choices are going to make effect. Then when you have that Pluto in that sign, it's going to have a bit of shadow for that whole generation, regardless of which other sign it would be in. So you might have your Venus in some other sign, but because Venus is another sign, then you're trying to make that happen, but there's going to be an undercurrent, a generational factor of Pluto in Taurus or Pluto in Libra, and not loving yourself or not thinking you're not going to get what you're having to fight for. There's going to be a harshness or a lack of innocence essentially behind the Venus to begin with because of the Pluto. So sometimes when you get afraid, Pluto floats, it sits underneath it, but it comes to the surface every now and then. So you see a predisposition to it. You can't accentuate it. Basically, when you're working with a chart, you're going to work with the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and you can almost ignore the rest. You have to get your sense of standards of how to live, how to find your confidence, your security from the basic planets you can see, the Sun, Moon, and the 5 planets. Then, depending how secure, how stable that Saturnine personal inner planet world is, you can see how excitement and shock can disrupt it and how much can be okay and how much would be devastating. How much belief and faith and vastness and big schemes can come in and how they can disturb the whole personal things or accentuate it. And how confrontations of truth can come up and challenge whatever you have and affect the whole thing. But your standard of normal is your Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, your basic chart of the planets you can see. That's normal. That normalness is what Pluto is challenging. So Pluto, when it's in Venus, it's going to affect your choices. But your Venus is going to be affected by your whole chart. You have to look at Venus where it is to see how your Venus works. But it already puts a tendency, if your Venus is going along good, but suddenly you run into a fear or you run into a generational fear, it's going to have a bigger effect than if Pluto wasn't in that sign. So I don't want you to get too complicated, getting into too many techniques around. Just trying to show how this energy works with it. It's enough to just wander through the sign, and it's enough to leave Uranus, Neptune, Pluto sort of sitting there as floaters in the signs. You'll see them much more clearly in the houses. But there's different information from each planet, a different layer of consciousness, a different level of understanding, different level of meaning, different level of behavior and attitudes to it. That's what I'm trying to teach you in between the lines of going through each planet every week and just holding to the signs, not taking any other information. So even if you don't know someone's time of birth and you have to do just a chart for the day where the planets and the signs are in, there's still a lot of information you can get. So it's still, you can do valid consultations and talk to people validly about real issues just by working with the planets and the signs and the aspects. That if you don't have the houses, if you're used to working only with the houses, you have to adjust the time to try and see which one would work. But if you don't know, you can leave the houses out, and there's still lots of information to get. So Pluto challenges how you receive love and what's going to be satisfying. So you might get satisfied and not like what you get, and then what? You're married, you don't want to be with who you're with. That's the disenchantment of Pluto on Venus, or Pluto in the Venus-ruled signs. When you put Pluto into Aries or Scorpio, into the Mars-ruled signs, this is a power complex. This is are you strong enough? Will you use your strength? Will you fight back? Will you run? Are you afraid? You'll run into power struggles. And how well do you use your strength, your power, how your muscle shape? So for anyone with that generation, Pluto and Scorpio, martial arts has grown tremendously by that generation. It's always been there, but the generation with the Pluto and Scorpio sees the real value of it and the healing sides of it. But to be strong at anything, whether it's to run, just be physically fit, it's going to take some efforts to have to, some controls, and you have to give up other things to be able to get in shape. You know, you got to give up the desserts and the binging to be able to just physically get in shape and work out every day. So Pluto's like the sergeant major in Scorpio or in Aries for Mars rules it. You have to work for this. Are you ready for this? So there's an over-control factor around your energy, and therefore an over-control factor in how you make love. Like Venus is an over-control factor of fear of receiving or letting someone reach you, fear of surrender. Pluto in the Mars signs, there's a fear of not being strong enough, there's a fear of performing, and there's a necessity of having to perform. So it puts power struggles whenever you use power or force or energy, whether it hurts people or doesn't.